Drafting, or slipstreaming, is a technique in which two or more cars race nose to tail as closely as possible. The lead car breaks the air in front and creates a vacuum between its rear end and the second car's nose. This vacuum pulls the second car toward the back of the first. As the second car gets closer to the back of the first, the aerodynamic drag on the lead car is reduced. The net effect is that both cars become faster than they would be if they were racing by themselves. How much faster? Well, at the restrictor plate tracks, where the drafting effect is magnified due to the less powerful engines being used, two experienced drivers drafting together can make up about 2 seconds per lap on an experienced driver who is running by himself. By being patient and staying in line, a group of 2 or more cars can run down a single car very quickly. Conversely, 2 cars running side by side will create drag and slow both of them down. Use this knowledge to your advantage. If you're part of a draft train and you see a couple of cars up ahead battling and racing side by side, stay in line and just watch how quickly you reel them in. There are 2 downsides to the draft. First, unless you're leading the draft train, you'll be blocking the flow of air to your radiator, so keep an eye on that water temperature gauge. If it really starts to skyrocket, you'll need to get some fresh air into the radiator to cool things down. If you're really good, you can do this without giving up your spot in line. Pull out from behind that car in front of you just enough to cool the engine, but not enough to let the car behind you take your spot in line. This takes a lot of practice to pull off, but it's an extremely valuable skill to have because once you've mastered it, you'll be able to put more grill tape on the front of the car than the other guys, and more grill tape equals more speed. The second downside to the draft is that at the restrictor plate tracks, the draft is so strong that it's impossible for a single car to pull away from a group of cars that are drafting together. This means that the field tends to remain bunched together, making it easy for a small mistake to trigger a big accident. That's why patience and discipline are so vital to success at Daytona and Talladega. To master the draft, you'll need to know exactly where the front end of your car is, because once you get up to the back of that other car, at some point you'll need to back off in order to avoid bumping into him. This is critical when you're turning, because any contact at that point is likely to send one or both of you careening up the track and into the wall. For this reason, you'll find that while inexperienced drivers can draft to the point of bumping on a straight, they will back off a lot in the turns. To minimize your lap times, you'll need to figure out just when and where to back off the throttle so that you can stay right on that other car's tail all the way around the racetrack, even in the turns. Drafting is all about momentum. When you're really hooked up with another car or group of cars, you can build up a ton of momentum. To get to the front of the field, you'll need to learn how to recognize who's got that momentum and who doesn't, and try to put yourself in a position so that you're always a part of the group with the most momentum. If you want to pass that car in front of you, you'll need to pull out from behind him and hope that the cars behind you decide to stay with you. If they do, chances are you'll be able to zoom right by. If they don't, you could find yourself all alone with no drafting help, and you'll often have no choice but to watch the draft train zoom right by you. This is what the pros call being hung out to dry. If this happens to you, don't panic. Just try to get back in line before you find yourself at the back of the field. If you're stuck in the line behind someone and you see another group of cars drafting up towards you, don't be afraid to pull down and get in front of that group so that you can hook onto the front of the train. If you've picked up a head of steam and are coming up on a group of cars from behind, don't be afraid to take the high line in order to get around them. Your momentum will usually be more than enough to offset the additional ground you'll need to cover by going to the outside. Okay, we've talked about how to pull out and pass, but what if you're the lead car in the draft? Most of the time, you're a sitting duck. Once that car behind you gets even a bumper up alongside you, he and his drafting partners can zoom right by. How can you defend against this? Well, to be perfectly frank, the odds are against you unless there's just a single car behind you. But there are a couple of things you can do to hold off the pack if you find yourself at the front of the field as the laps are winding down. First, you can take a low line around the track. If they're going to draft past you, make them work for it and do it on the high side. They'll need to travel a greater distance in order to get by, and there's a chance that once the car immediately behind you goes to the high side, one or more of his pursuers will pull down into your lane and sell him out. Second, you can try to do what the pros call breaking the draft. On the straights, move back and forth across the track in order to reduce the aerodynamic advantage you are giving your pursuers. Of course, you need to be careful that you don't lose too much speed by doing this, but you'll find that sometimes, in an attempt to match your moves, the draft train will break up and lose its momentum. Lastly, use that mirror and do some basic defensive driving. At the restrictor plate tracks in particular, It's very common for pass attempts to be initiated at the start of the straights. Anticipate this, and as you come off the corners, be prepared to move to the low side to block. Again, you're looking to break the momentum of your pursuers, and by making a move that causes them to lift off the throttle for even a split second, you'll be doing exactly that. There's one last little drafting tip that can help you out, especially if you find yourself all alone and being pursued by a group of cars, and that's to use slower traffic to your advantage. Even the slowest cars can provide you with a brief draft benefit. Just pull down behind one and stay there until you're about a second away from making contact, then pull out and pass. When you do this, it's very important that you be smooth with your steering. Any violent jerking of the wheel will bleed off speed and will nullify the positive effects of the draft.